Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. I am the occult technician, and this is Mind War, episode 3. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to pick up where we left off. We are working from a book titled Mind War by Dr. Michael Aguino. Mind War was written as a strategy for peace, a strategy in order to avoid physical war with regards to global scale conflicts. We are taking the tactics and teachings of Mind War. We are adapting them to our own personal lives in order to deal with issues in our own lives. One of the things that we strive for is what the book calls the Aristos. Aristos is basically the best possible scenario for your current situation. Everyone's situation is different. We have to take a very clear and truthful, honest look at our own lives. What is the situation that we currently find ourselves in? And what is the best scenario for that situation? We have to be careful not to spend too much of our time hoping and wishing and thinking that our lives should be something that it just cannot be. There's no way that we can escape our current situation. Sometimes that's just life, right? Maybe it's because of our age, our financial situation, a relationship situation. And sometimes we just have to recognize that. We have to take a clear inventory of what our life really is and find out what the best Aristos is. What is the best scenario for our given situation? And when we do that, we can take an honest look and really help us move forward with some truths. And that's very important. One of the things that we also discussed in the last two episodes is about when you're making changes in your life, whether it is a belief system that you're changing. So maybe you are changing your religious beliefs. Maybe you are changing your political beliefs. If you are in a household, if you are in a situation, maybe a work environment where there's a strong religious presence, where there is a strong political presence, before you go and announce these changes that you're going to make to your life, remember we talked about making them quietly behind the scenes. Let them soak in for a while. Grow into this new thought process. Grow into this new belief system before you go and announce it to everyone in your life, before you begin to propagandize it to those around you. We want to make sure that any changes that you are making, that it's something that over time you feel solid with, that you feel accepted, where these changes really become concrete in your life. And it's not just something that in a year you'll be embarrassed about, right? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done this. Because any of those changes, when you announce them too quickly, if you stumble throughout your change, if there is difficult periods in your growth process, right? If you've announced that to everyone and they are keeping tabs, which people do, right? They can use that against you if you stumble. And again, one of the goals in Mind War is there's no reason to arm those people around you, the situations around you that may be coming against you. There's no reason to arm them with more ammunition, right? So we've talked again about letting the changes sink in before you go and make those big announcements, right? So again, we're working from Mind War. We're adapting the global scale tactics from the book Mind War. We're adapting them to our personal lives in order to grow, make changes, become healthier, become happier, and uh, heal ourselves, heal our mind, body, and spirit. That is a theme that goes throughout all of my art. That is a theme that goes throughout my videos. Healing the mind, body, and spirit. We can do it, folks. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be traditional boring therapy. It doesn't have to be extreme um, dictatorial religions or extreme political belief systems that we just fall into. We can find these healing tools in other ways, right? And so that's what we're doing here. We're trying to use the book Mind War to grab our own attention, grab other people's attention, and make the process of healing, make the process of growth not such a boring, sterile, kind of institutional step-by-step thing, right? We're trying to add some fun to it, and we're creating new characters for ourselves in our lives, and we are growing into those characters, right? So, again, thank you for joining me, and let's pick up where we left off in the book titled Mind War. We are we're on page 46, Declaration of Mind War. The first reform of Mind War, therefore, is one of demarcation. It begins with the formal declaration of Mind War and ends with an equally formal declaration of peace. Before these are brushed aside as archaic ceremonies, consider the reasons for them. The purposes of a declaration of Mind War are: number one, to require the Congress to meet its responsibility under the Constitution Article 1.8.11 to decide when the United States takes any international or supranational conflict from diplomacy to war. Such a decision, which directly affects countless lives on all sides, is simply too consequential to be abandoned to the current president, who, of course, is himself not an independent decision maker in such matters, even if personally well intentioned. The rationale of Article 1, actually, I think it's Article I.8.11, was not just to ensure that the United States would not be rashly dragged or tricked into war. It was also to ensure that if a war were declared by the elected representatives of the national citizenry, a proportionate number of that citizenry would understand and agree with the vote. In short, when the United States declares war, the entire country should be behind it. It should never be a fiat by a clique, which the people neither understand nor endorse. That is the formula to lose a war from the moment it is begun, as we have experienced all too often in our post-World War II series of fiat wars. So Dr. Arguino is saying here, before you jump into war, right? Again, he's talking about the United States jumping into a global style war. Before we do that on our personal lives, we need to really think about the consequences. We need to make sure that all aspects of our lives are going to be able and willing to participate in the mind war. And again, mind war ultimately is something that, whether we like it or not, it's happening all around us. And so it's better now to begin preparing and thinking and getting your strategy and tactics ready for your formal declaration of mind war. Number two, to state clearly the circumstances which have caused further diplomacy to be rejected in favor of war. This is an explanation for three audiences: the citizenry of the United States, the opponent country or group, and the onlooking rest of the world. Each must be convinced that the state's stated reasons are both complete and sincere. So, again, this is kind of what we were talking about before. Um, Before you go and make these changes, make sure that you clearly understand uh, what changes are going to be occurring in your life. Even if like myself, maybe not know exactly what every step is going to be, you want to really have this an end game. What is your purpose? What is your goal? Who do you want to become? Who is the new character that you're creating in your life that you are working towards? If this isn't done, the U.S. citizenry will suspect that it has been deceived and will not support the war. So again, we need to make sure that we're not deceiving those around us once we've made some changes, right? The opponent will not accurately understand why it is being attacked, which prevents it from knowledgeably trying to address those reasons if it wishes to do so, and also immediately antagonizes it with the suspension or with the suspicion that the attack is for ulterior, more venile reasons. So again, when we're making these changes, if there are people in your life that are causing trouble for you, right? Based on, again, on things that may just be part of their nature. They're growing up, the things that they've done, right? They were born into a religion. They were born into a political household. They were born into a specific culture because of the state that they live in or the country that they live in. Again, you don't want to just begin completely attacking those things without more of a formal declaration of, here's why these things are hurting me. Here's why I'm making a change personally, and here's what you can do to help, right? If not, then the war will just continue. And that's what we're looking to avoid here, folks. The rest of the world will not see the justice of the U.S. attack and may assume that it is mere predatory aggression. This is not just a public relations consideration, as third parties are often drawn into ongoing wars as they spread and escalate. The sooner and more definitively that the United States can establish its just cause, the less chance it will be surprised by overt or covert additional enemies later on. So, an example of this is, let's say you are a teenager. You're living in a household, again, your situation, you are not old enough to move out. You don't financially have the means to move out. You still have to finish school. So that is the situation that you're in. So that you're looking to make some changes in your life. You may be rebelling, a little bit of teenage rebellion. That's fine and understandable. And if you go on an extreme attack and start attacking everyone and everything around you, right? All the people that maybe a year or two ago when you were younger, you loved them and loved going to church, didn't mind the politics that they were, you were just kind of following the crowd, following the culture. If you are now making some changes, understand that it's not just those closest to you, but it's also the surrounding people, friends of family, other coworkers, other students, things like that. They may see this change and say, wait, what is this? What is this attack now? Why is this person attacking our culture? Why is this person attacking our belief systems? But again, it's about you. What are the changes you want to make in your life? So it's better to, once some of those changes have been made, once you have grown and shown some growth, and people start to recognize that you're healthier, happier, more successful, and it is what you're doing, they will inquire. They'll want to know, what are you doing? What changes have you made? Why am I seeing you succeed where in the past you may have been failing? What are these changes in your life? And that's when you can clarify more of what's going on. To state equally clearly the goal of the war, the conditions for its conclusion. Without such a statement, neither side knows where it's going or what it's doing. The war becomes a stumble around in a darkened room, with plenty of tripping over furniture and running into walls, and no open doors with illuminated exit signs. If, on the other hand, the United States makes it clear what it requires to stop the war, this country can direct its efforts, including popular support, towards achieving that goal. The enemy country also knows that what the United States wants of it, and can immediately or subsequently decide whether to comply. Onlooking third parties can more clearly estimate whether the war might or should involve them, or whether they can effectively steer clear of it. So again, you make a decision to make some changes. You quietly, behind the scenes, start to make some of these changes. Once they become concrete, once you become more successful in this new character that you're creating, in this new life that you're living, then you kind of make more of that formal declaration of, here's what I'm doing, here's what's going on, and here are my goals, right? So you can think of it like this. Again, maybe it's my goal is to get into college or university. My goal is going to be to find a new job. So let's say if you're looking for a career advancement, one of the things that you might do is you might go back to school and start learning some new skills, right? Now, when people start to notice that at your work, if maybe you're studying during your break, that may shake things up a little bit. Oh, why is this person studying? Why is this person looking to advance? Are they planning on leaving? Possibly, right? They don't need to know everything, but it is good to let people know that your goal is advancement and that you are working towards that, right? Let's see. Diagnosis of the disease. Physical war treats the symptoms of the disease only. Mind war treats the causes of the disease. As part of the declaration process, the root problem or problems of the destabilizing situation must be clearly and objectively identified in terms of both policies, systems, and those individuals or groups controlling them. In many ways, this will be the most difficult and exacting requirement of the mind war process because it calls for cold, unrationalizing honesty in all directions. There must be no off-the-table sacred cows, no traditional or habitual assumptions favoring either party's desires that can pre-skew and potentially derail a mind war solution. So we'll go into some of those sacred cows in a second. But again, very important, like we talked about earlier, you need honesty in all directions when you are thinking about your current situation, right? When you are taking the time to kind of observe your battlefield, your life, right? What are the realities of my life? What are the current situation that I'm in that I want to make changes to, and you need to do it honestly. Now, this is the most important part of mind war, right? Is being honest with yourself. You have to do it. You have to put aside all of the preconceived notions that you have, right? You have to sometimes take off some of the costumes that you're forced to wear throughout the day, right? Now, what do I mean by costumes? Okay, your costume of being an employee. When you go to work, you have to act a certain way. Your costume of being a parent. When you interact with your children, you have to act a certain way. or with your spouse, you have to act a certain way, right? The most important part of mind war is being honest with yourself, right? There's there's no reason to lie to yourself. If everyone else around you is lying to you, the one person in your life that has to be honest to you is you. You have to be honest with yourself. Taking a rational look at your situation, and again, thinking rationally, what is the best scenario that I can get into with my current situation? I may not be able to change my current situation. I may not be able to, right now, because of finances, find a new home, right? I may need to continue working at this job that I do not like for another year because I need new certifications or additional training that will get me ready to go into a new job. You have to be honest with yourself, right? It's better to take an honest look like that and start making some movements forward, again, for a new career, getting some additional training, starting now, understanding that it's going to take a year, maybe 2 years before you get your certificate. And then it might take another 6 months before you find a new job, right? So the scenario that I just described there is a 2-year process of change. But guess what? If you lie to yourself and don't do anything, 5 years from now, you will find yourself in the same situation. Do you get it? Right? If you keep lying to yourself, there will be no change. That's why we need honesty. You need to be honest with yourself first. Everyone around you, you tell them whatever they need to hear for you to be able to continue on with your focus, with your mission, with your mind war, to clear your battlefield, to win your battles, right? But honesty with yourself is the only way that you're going to win. Some of these sacred cows that we need to avoid: the acquisition or possession of nuclear or any other advanced form of weaponry, creation or preservation of economic advantage, either for a centralized economy or national industry or industrial/trade interests, type of government, whether autocratic, oligarch, democratic, theocratic, or any variation of these, internal national policies, customs, or issues being indirectly upon the conflict, and the demands or desires of uninvolved third parties, whether other nations seeking to profit from the situation, supernatural religious institutions, or international bodies such as the United Nations or NATO. So again, that first sacred cow, advanced weaponry, nuclear weapons, right? So that is, again, you find yourself in a situation, the people that are in your lives have something over you that they can use as a weapon, right? So again, if you are maybe in a relationship and you have children, the spouse can use the children against you, right? So we have to be careful of those sacred cows. In number 2, they talk about economics. Again, if the situation you find yourself in financially doesn't allow a bunch of changes, you have to be honest with that and understand that you may be limited in the changes that you're looking to make. What type of government you're under? Are you under an oligarchic, right? Do you have some type of tyrannical government over you? And what do I mean by that? Again, if you find yourself in a household that has very strong religious beliefs or strong political beliefs, that's very difficult to make changes that they're going to accept, right? International and national policies and customs. Again, the customs of the culture that you're in. You know, don't just go out there and start attacking the culture around you and thinking that you're going to be able to make a bunch of changes right away. It's not going to happen. It takes time, right? So instead of just going out and being very blatant about these attacks, slowly make the changes, okay? And then again, the uninvolved third parties. Just remember, as soon as you start to clear the battlefield in front of you, there will be third-party people who see these changes and want to attack you for it. Prescription of the cure, the aristos. The moment there is a formal declaration of mind war, all sacred cows become secondary to the primary task, which is mind war victory. If and when that is accomplished and the Defense Department returns the situation to civilian institutions, the pasture is once again their concern. Irrelevant and unessential considerations, sacred cows, are discarded. The key elements causing the situation are identified. These will be unique to each situation, of course, and so cannot be forced into standardized definitions or habitual responses to them. In the case of a territorial dispute, for instance, the disputing parties must be identified. It may be international or intertribal or religious, factional, political ideology, or a mixture of more than one of these. In each situation, we know only that the United States is one of the parties. The situation is then analyzed in terms of, number one, its desired solution for each party. Interesting. We are going to have to take into consideration what the desired solutions for the other parties involved are going to be. Family members, co-workers, friends, etc. Number two, the most beneficial solution for each party, which may not be identical to the desired one. All right. So again, you may have somebody in your life who, let's say, they're battling with drug or alcohol addiction. The solution that you want to see in their lives is that they become sober. That may not be the solution that they want. But everyone looking at the situation realizes that's the most beneficial solution, is for an unhealthy person who is battling with alcohol or drug addiction to become healthy. Okay. Number three, the minimum effective solution for each party. Number four, the minimum tolerable solution for each party, which may not be identical to the minimal effective one. What is the very least that we can do to find that aristos? These solutions are next plotted in a matrix within an overall time and cost boundary, and the intersections examined for matches. Ideally, a match will appear to fit one or two intersections, but probably not. So the Mind Warrior examines all 3 and 4 intersections, looking for the simplest, quickest, most economical, and least physical war triggering intersection. This becomes the Mind War victory objective, which the United States then openly announces to all parties. All participants are now aware of the U.S. Declaration of Mind War, the reasons for it, and the aristos for its conclusion. We now enter the difficult area of civilian control of the military. It is an old complaint of the U.S. military that its civilian superiors meddle in its conduct of an assigned war, screwing it up. Civilians respond with the mantra that war is too important to be left to generals, and that, as indeed in physical war, the blind application of brute force solves nothing. Mind war must, therefore, at this point, start the continuous process of presenting its case to its civilian superiors. So again, once you decide to start making these changes, once you start to lay out a plan for these changes to take effect, once you start to apply some of the changes and seeing some growth, and you make a formal declaration of mind war, again, now you start to let the people in your life know that you've made these changes and that things aren't going to be the same. right? You can think of those people around you as the civilians who control the military, right? We have to talk to them in their language and get them on board um, with the solutions that they feel are going to work best for them, solutions that they'll agree to. Part 3, Phase 2, the reverse engineering of the decided outcome from its establishment back to its present situation. The purpose of this is simply to identify all of the component changes that will be necessary to accomplish the desired transformation. If one or more components are found to be impossible, then the overall goal needs to be reconceptualized or reduced until it is practically achievable. Here, socio-political and economic forecasting techniques are essential. Present policy options must be extended and extrapolated. The aggregate of these must be analyzed into a cross matrix to ascertain whether there are any incompatibilities. Any developing component change must be re-entered into the matrix to ensure that the totality remains viable. From each completed matrix, a mind war map emerges. How to get there from here. As with Phase 1, this map must be understandable by and acceptable to United States decision makers at all levels. A mind war matrix must stand on all of its feet to be effective. And if any one of them is undermined, the matrix collapses. Thus, the consensus arrived at in Phase 1 must survive Phase 2, which means that the general and ideal must survive its translation into the specific and practical. Okay. So I watched a video yesterday. It was a short one where they were talking about something called the 369 technique, right? Where you are supposed to envision the goal that you want to complete. So maybe, again, it's a transformation of who you are. You want to become someone who is better educated, healthier, more successful in their career, happier in their relationships, works harder on their hobbies, whatever it may be that these changes are that you want to make. And what you do is you think about those things and you envision that you've already completed all of the goals required for you to achieve that transformation. So you visualize yourself and act as if the transformation is already complete. And so the technique that they talked about is that in the morning you write down what that transformation looks like, right? I'm going to be more successful in my career, whatever it may be. You write it down 3 times in the morning, 6 times in the afternoon, and 9 times before you go to bed, right? I don't know if that works. If you try it, let me know. But basically, what it is, again, you are visualizing yourself having already made those transformations, right? You are playing the new character. In a way, throughout my art, you can see that. I have become the person that I wanted to be 2 years ago, right? It's taken quite a bit of work for me to get here, but what you're literally seeing through this video right now is me achieving the goals that I had set 2 years ago, right? Now, again, I've kind of battled through the mud and the smoke and all the fog of war to kind of get here, find these tools, and refine them. And again, I am no master at this. I know that there are other people much more capable at completing these types of transformations. But my hope and the reason that I'm doing all this work right now is to help other people so they don't have to kind of go through all that murkiness that I did, through that fog of war. Give them maybe some more clear-cut goals and guidelines and just tools to help you achieve your goals, to become the new character that you want to be, right?
Three, two, one. Wake up. Open your eyes.
Number 4, phase 3, the mind war attack. The matrix is set in motion. Again, you have your plan and now you're setting it in motion. Its components are assigned to appropriate implementation units, and those units delegate them further down to implementation action elements. A simultaneous continuous feedback system is instituted so that every action, inaction, success, and failure is fed back to the overall mind war matrix. If a failure is examined and found to be correctable, the action is retired until successful, or retried until successful. It is evaluated as uncorrectable and cannot be compensated for at higher intermediate levels. The mind war matrix is again adjusted to reduce the overall goal accordingly. This process of feedback and matrix goal reduction is not to be understood as an easy out. Mind war is just that, a war. It is a deliberate effort to change the enemy. This is rarely a simple or easy task. Mind war requires outthinking the enemy at all times and stages of the conflict, and this is a constant demanding process. The mind war matrix is no good if it is reduced to zero or to a fiction of actual accomplishment. It must be pressed forward, forced into existence by the full will and skill of the United States. Only where it is discovered to be intrinsically flawed should it be modified. Okay. So again, a deliberate effort to change the enemy, right? So who is the enemy in our personal mind war? It doesn't necessarily mean other people or other institutions and things like that. Sometimes it's simple behaviors. The enemy for us may be unhealthy eating habits, right? So one leg of the mind war matrix that you're creating might be, I need to change my unhealthy eating habits. Another leg might be, I need to also begin physical exercise, right? And we know that if the healthy eating leg of the matrix is corrupted or is not being fully implemented, it's going to affect the other leg where you're doing the physical exercise. Okay? So it's important to make sure that you are being honest. Again, that honesty of recognizing, okay, here's the actual changes that I can make regarding healthy eating. Again, if you find yourself in a household where a certain type of eating goes on, it's going to be difficult. If the people around you have a little more control over the food that you eat than you would like, and they're constantly eating fast food and stuff, you're going to have to make some small incremental changes. And it might be something as simple as the next time you go, say, listen, I'm just going to get the grilled chicken sandwich combo this time. I know that sounds silly, but maybe something that small. Saying, hey, can I get an iced tea instead of a soda? Right? Small incremental changes that those around you may not even recognize until you have done it over and over and over. right? Now it's 3 months later, you've started to implement some of these changes. They've become routine in your life. So again, instead of drinking the giant soda, you're drinking the iced tea, right? And you see that your healthy eating is making you feel better. And when you physically feel better, now you can exercise more. And again, that exercise may need to be covert. You might be in an unhealthy living situation where the people around you are extremely unhealthy. And if you start exercising in front of them, they are going to attack you. So some of your exercise might need to be covert. Simple things like maybe adding a few extra chores to your list, and while you're doing your chores, you're adding some type of exercise. Taking the dog out for a walk, things like that, that aren't going to make a lot of waves for the situation that you're in, but you can see some slight changes, right? Number 5, phase 4, mind war victory. Once the mind war matrix is achieved, formal victory is declared and the war is immediately and absolutely ended. This is a signal to the vanquished enemy that it is no longer under attack, and to the United States government and citizenry that no more assets are to be devoted. The formal, unilateral declaration of peace is just as important to the concept of mind war as the earlier declaration of war. Current physical war eliminates both, with the result that not only is the Constitution ignored, but the nation and the world not given any clear and unequivocal signal of both. With the declaration of war, all responsibility is turned over to the Defense Department. Exterior activity, such as by the intelligence community, ceases. This so as not to interfere with the mind war matrix. With the declaration of peace, both the United States and the vanquished country know that the mind war campaign is finally and fully halted. International relations are returned to normal diplomatic and commercial venues. The intelligence community can now be re-engaged if appropriate. In Chapter 3, concerning the role of intelligence in mind war. And that's it. Upon a first reading, one may be taken aback by the apparent simplicity of this phase structure. This is not only intentional, but indeed essential. Recourse to the current U.S. Army MESO manuals quickly induces MAGO. Over the years, PSYOP has become the darling of innumerable staff studies, think tanks, and cartoons of eggheads. The result is something that no one can actually use. So MISO is Military Information Support Operations, and MEGO is My Eyes Glaze Over. Okay. All right. The concept and component phases of mind war must be simple, easy to use, flexible, and intuitive. Its focus can be broadened and extended at progressively higher echelons, but the techniques themselves must be as simple as a Boy Scout pocket knife. Only thus will mind war be able to react instantly to changing conditions and to remain 2 steps ahead of the enemy. In Part 2, each of the mind war branches and their functions are examined in detail. Then in Part 3, the 5 phases of a mind war campaign are discussed to include the mixture of branch expertise necessary for their success. So again, that was Part 1. Again, what is the Aristos? What is the best scenario for our current situation? We create the mind war matrix, understanding what our goals are, thinking about who we are going to be in the future, setting up a plan. We begin to make some of those changes in our lives silently, covertly, behind the scenes. We let those sink in. We let those become concrete. We begin to recognize the results of those changes once those around us, right? Once they start to recognize some of those changes, then we can propagandize those changes. Then we can start to tell people, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, here's the goal. That is when they kind of recognize, oh, something has changed, right? You're basically inviting them to the mind war, right? Because again, our goal is to stay out of the physical war. Think of physical war as the old situation that you were in, right? A household controlled by a dictatorial religion, a dictatorial political viewpoint, a dictatorial culture, whatever it may be that you're trying to change because it is damaging to you. Again, it's not always necessary to take it head on. It's not always necessary from day one to announce exactly what you're doing and what you're planning. When you do that, when you're too dramatic and you're too bold in your changes up front, you're going to get squashed. It's happened in my life over and over again, right? In my current workplace, I was a little too active. I took a few months to observe what was going on, to observe what this situation I had found myself in. And I had thought that I had kind of gathered enough evidence of the bad behaviors of those in the organization and said, hey, here's what's going on. This is the history that I've heard from other employees. These are the things that I've seen on my own. And these are the changes that need to be implemented soon, quickly. If not, this bad behavior is going to continue, right? I was openly told no changes will be made. Bad behavior will continue without any form of recourse. And things over the last few months have desperately gotten worse. So I've had to change my strategy where now I'm just letting the fire burn. Just watching the wildfire in this organization that I work for continue to burn out of control, continue to see people's behavior become worse and worse. And now those people who I tried to warn about what was happening, they are forced to see it on their own, right? And so when they decide at some point to come back to the table, then I will have to update my scenario, what the best Oristos for my current situation is going to be. And it will probably even be more demanding than my original requests were. Okay, so this is an example of how you have to be careful about making too many changes and coming out too boldly in the beginning, right? It has failed for me multiple times, but ultimately in the end, those changes, they happen, right? Almost every organization that I've worked for, I've been a little too gung-ho in the beginning. I've said, here are the changes that need to be made now. If we do it, we will be ahead of the game. And almost all of them seem to have been shot down, ignored, until eventually those changes became problems, right? Instead of implementing the changes that I suggested for the current situation that we were in, they just allowed things to continue to fester, and ultimately things became broken, and then we fixed them usually years behind. So we're going to try to avoid that. But once you have built your mind war matrix, once you have decided this is who I want to be, these are the changes that I want to make, we're starting to implement some of those changes behind the scenes. We implement them covertly. That's part of part one for the mind war, right? Setting up your battle plan. So part two, Army War Branches. And again, just as a reminder, the author of this book, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino, was a Army Intelligence Operations Officer. He was writing this book as requested by his superiors. I think it was in the 80s, right? Maybe in the 90s, as a way to update psychological operations. One of his biggest issues was that the psychological operations, aka the mind war, was often brought in after a physical war had already started. And the tools and tactics that are meant for a global scale in the book Mind War, right? The goal is to avoid physical war. We're going to avoid attacking each other physically, destroying our physical bodies, destroying our homes and industries and utilities, right? So when we work through this book and you hear these type of military tactics and you hear phrases like the United States will do this or the Army will do that, again, we're adapting these things for our own lives, right? So in this book, the United States, that's us, that's who we are, right? That's what we represent, a multifaceted individual, right? That is multi-layered. We are complicated people. All of us are. We all live complicated lives, even the simplest of us, right? And we do that because, again, we're trying to make this therapy, if this is therapy, we're trying to make these healing changes fun. We're trying not to make this a boring self-help, but we're trying to add some flair to it. Part 2, Army War Branches. Chapter 2, the physical war branches. Actually, let's see. What is the spirit of the bayonet? To kill. U.S. Army Infantry School. The physical war mission of the Army. The Army's mission is to fight and win our nation's wars by providing prompt, sustained land dominance across the full range of military operations and spectrum of conflict in support of combatant commanders. We do this by executing Title 10 and Title 32 United States Code directives to include organizing, equipping, and training forces for the conduct of prompt and sustained combat operations on land, accomplishing missions assigned by the President, Secretary of Defense, and combatant commanders, and transforming for the future. So states the U.S. Army's official website. What this means in practice is that the Army is designed and organized for physical war through its backbone combat arms branches: infantry, Army cavalry, and field air defense artillery. Often grouped with these are aviation, the Combat Corps of Engineers, and the Signal Corps. And behind these are numerous combat support and combat service support branches. In principle and practice, they all exist to maximize the Army's physical war combat power, which is to kill, capture, and or destroy whatever is defined as the enemy by higher authority, in practice, the President, and in theory, the Congress of the United States. The armed services, the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, have similar general mission statements reflecting their operational environments. But it is the Army which focuses predominantly upon land operations, and land is where people live and their means of livelihood are established. As the Army is configured and employed, so necessarily must follow the other services. Right, so the goal of the Army is to fight war, command the battlefield, win the war on land. B, special operations branches in the PSI-WAR or FISWAR, Physical War Army. In addition to the traditional established combat branches of the Army, there presently exist 3 special operations branches which, until the implementation of Mind War, function simply to augment, support, and clean up their physical war campaigns. Thus, they are in effect, if not in self-image, battlefield janitors. The oldest of these, Civil Affairs Branch, was formally established in 1955 as the Civil Affairs and Military Government Branch, USAR, following a long history of less formal, events-driven offices and organizations within the Army to deal with post-physical war civilian crises. In 1961, it was expanded into an active Army branch as well, though it remains accessible by post-commissioning officer transfer only. The other 2 branches, Special Forces and Psychological Operations, came into being as branch and material specialties following World War II. Thus, officers course qualified for them retained their original branch affiliations and normally returned to them after temporary assignments to Special Forces or Psychological Operations units. Special Forces was finally formalized as a branch in 1987 and Psychological Operations in 2006. As reviewed in chapters 3 through 5, civilian affairs, special forces, and psychological operations shared not only their battlefield janitor status, but a distinctively non-destructive doctrinal orientation. Civilian affairs was expected to rebuild destroyed population infrastructures. Special forces was to teach and train local military and paramilitary individuals and groups. And psychological operations was to attempt to control both civil and military audiences through propaganda. In the new mind war environment, the relationship of these 3 branches to the physical war branches of the Army is conceptually reversed. The special operations branches, now evolved into new designs, functions, and names, becomes the Army's initial and principal means of fulfilling its mission. The physical war branches and their support systems become a less desirable alternative to be employed only if mind war fails. Indeed, it is their very undesirability, the prospect of the death, injury, and destruction they inflict, that encourages all the more interest in a mind war solution by all groups involved and all the individuals involved. Okay. So let's think about this for a minute. As we decide to create our mind war matrix, as we start to set goals and make plans for the changes in our lives, right? Overall, we are the Army, right? We think of ourselves as the Army in total. And we have different branches in our Army that are going to be do different things, as we just talked about here. So the civil affairs, right, where here it's talked about rebuilding destroyed population infrastructures, okay? Your civil affairs branch in your own personal life might be responsible with something as simple as cleaning your room, right? Making a simple change like that. The Special Forces team, which is meant to train local military and paramilitary individuals or groups, maybe the Special Forces team or branch in yourself, you can think of them as that's your physical training, right? So the civil affairs, you're cleaning up your room, you're preparing your space in order to learn, right? And then the special forces within yourself, that is where you are going to physically train yourself to become healthier, right? Because we know that eating healthier, exercising more, that is going to help our mind also, right? And then the psychological operations team within ourselves, the psychological operations branch within ourselves. Their goal is to propagandize those around us to the changes that we've made. We're going to get them to accept these changes, whether they like it or not, and let them know this is the new way that things are going to be. Okay? But again, we have to be very careful about how we announce that, propagandize that. Don't do it too early. Let the changes sink in before we get too busy letting other people know, because we cannot fail. We cannot fail in the mind war, because that will take us simply back to the physical war. Again, if your mind war is against unhealthy alcohol and drug addiction, right? If that's the physical war, is when you're constantly warring with your own physical body because you're drinking too much, you're doing too many drugs, right? It's the mind war that's going to get you out of it. And we cannot fail. All of you out there who have dealt with alcohol and drug addiction, you have friends and you have family who have failed at the mind war, and they have lost the physical war. I don't need to go into detail, but you've all been a part of it. You've seen it. You've seen people fail the mind war, and the physical war is lost. C, the mind war mission of the Army. Since its creation on the 14th of June, 1775, the U.S. Army has been an institution and an engine of death and destruction, albeit and avowedly to preserve and protect the United States and its citizenry. Mind War proposes to change the Army's operational methodology to a completely constructive and creative one, with its physical war power maintained and brandished as the same sort of unthinkable deterrent as the nation's nuclear arsenal. Thus, other nation states and non-state groups will have no alternative but to choose the mind war option, which once they do, they will discover it works entirely to their rescue and regeneration. The evolution of mind war will be complete when the arrival of any U.S. Army soldier, indeed any U.S. service member, anywhere in the world, is looked upon by everyone present as a blessing. Right? That physical war in our own personal lives, we've talked about it, unhealthy habits, dictatorial living situations, dictatorial working environments. That's the physical war. Up until this point, you have been a soldier fighting that physical war, and it's destroying you, and it's destroying your household, it's destroying your family, your friendships, it's destroying your work environment, because everyone is fighting the physical war. It's not just you. Our goal with mind war is to create a new battlefield, a new set of tools and tactics to end the physical war, to end the yelling, to end the desperation and the depression, to end the unhealthy habits, the unhealthy living styles, right? We're going to work our way out of those things. The mind war will work. You will achieve your Aristos. You're going to do it covertly at first, make the changes on a personal level, and as they begin to become concrete, we start to change the world around us. All right. So we're going to leave it there. That was episode 3 of Mind War. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you all being here. Again, you can find my art on Instagram at The Occult Technician. You can find my videos on YouTube. Also, take a look. There's links in my bio to my Etsy shop to where you can get all kinds of great hats, beanies, hoodies, t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, stickers. Please check it out when you get a chance. And thank you again for joining me in this episode of Mind War. Your friend Victor, the Occult Technician.